Dear friends, welcome to InQUEST, in-depth analysis and to the point. Dear friends, under this program, we are coming up with one more initiative, that is Acts and Policies of India series. So in this series, we will be learning about various acts and policies of India. So this activity is useful for your UPSC, Prelims, Mains and essay writing, KPSC and other state public service commission examinations and all other competitive examinations. So under which we are starting our very first lesson. So wherein we will be learning about an act. So that is Armed Forces Special Powers Act. In short, it is called as AFSPA. Now, what are the things that we will be learning here? So we will learn what you mean by AFSPA, historical developments, both pre-independence and post-independence, features of the act, powers given under the act, and various commissions and their recommendations and say of Supreme Court regarding AFSPA recently. Now, first and foremost, we need to understand what is AFSPA. AFSPA, in short, called as Armed Forces Act. This is an act of the Parliament of India that grants special powers to the Indian Armed Forces, the power to maintain public order in disturbed areas. So first and foremost, we need to understand what do you mean by disturbed areas. So disturbed areas in the sense, let us say any state or a part of the state, if there is a lot of civil unrest and that is beyond the capacity of the state police to contain them, then the Parliament of India can grant special powers to the Indian Armed Forces, the power to maintain public order. So this is called as Armed Forces Special Powers Act 1958. Now, according to the Disturbed Areas Act 1976, once declared disturbed, for example, any state or part of the state, if it is declared as disturbed once, the area has to maintain status quo for a minimum of 3 months. So within 3 months, if the conditions become normal, then this can be revoked. If not, this can be extended for any length of time. One such act passed on 11 September 1958 and it was applicable to Naga Hills. Then it was part of Assam. So during 11 September 1958, such act was passed in Naga Hills. Earlier it was part of Assam. Now it is segregated as a separate state as Nagaland. Later, following so many decades, it spread one by one to other 7 sister states in India's northeastern part of the country. So when we look at the northeastern part of the country, this is where to the maximum extent Armed Forces Special Powers Act was in force, like various districts of northeastern parts of the country like Tripura, Mizoram, Manipur, Meghalaya, Assam, Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh. After this, another one passed in 1983 and it was applicable to 2 states. One is Punjab and Chandigarh, and it was withdrawn in 1997. So roughly for about 14 years it was in force, then later it was revoked. An act passed in 1990 was applicable to Jammu and Kashmir and it is in force even today. At present, it is in force in state of Assam, Nagaland and Manipur, it is not in the entire state of Manipur excluding Imphal Municipal Council area, Changlang, Longding and Tirap districts of the Arunachal Pradesh and areas falling within the jurisdiction of the 8 police stations of districts in Arunachal Pradesh that is bordering the state of Assam. Now, let us understand the historical developments of this act. So before, let us learn about the pre-independent developments. The Armed Forces Special Powers Ordinance of 1942 was promulgated by the British on 15th August 1942 to suppress the Quit India movement. So as we all know, during independence struggle, there was a movement that's called as Quit India movement. To suppress this, for the very first time, the British on 15th August 1942 promulgated Armed Forces Special Powers Ordinance in the year 1942. And this is later modeled on these lines. They passed 4 ordinances. Number 1, the Bengal disturbed area. Number 2, the Assam disturbed area. Number 3, the East Bengal disturbed area. Number 4, the United Provinces disturbed areas. Later, These ordinances were invoked by the central government to deal with the internal security situation in the country in 1947, which emerged due to the partitioning of India. So when India became independent, or there was a partitioning of India in the year 1947, the central government invoked these ordinances to maintain or to deal with the internal security situation. And it connects to Article 355 of the Indian Constitution that confers power to the central government to protect every state from internal disturbances. So if there are any internal disturbances in any particular state, the central government has the power to protect every state according to Article 355 of the Indian Constitution. Now let us talk about various events after independence. Armed Forces Special Powers Act 1958. So it started in the state of Assam. So what happened was, there was a boycott of the first general election of 1952, which later extended to a boycott of government schools and officials. So this happened, as I told you earlier, in the state of Assam. So there was boycott of first general elections in the year 1958. Later, they boycott the government schools and also officials. In order to deal with the situation, the Assam government imposed Assam Maintenance of Public Order Autonomous District Act in Naga Hills in 1953 and intensified police action against the rebels. But when the situation worsened, Assam deployed the Assam Rifles in Naga Hills and enacted Assam Disturbed Areas Act of 1955. This provided a legal framework for the paramilitary forces and the armed state police to combat insurgency in the region. So to combat insurgency in the region, according to Assam Disturbed Areas Act of 1955, they gave all legal framework for the paramilitary forces and to the armed state police. But the Assam Rifles and also state armed police could not contain Naga rebellion, and the rebel Naga National Council, in short called as NNC, they actually formed a parallel government, the federal government of Nagaland, on 23rd March 1956. So you can see the situation here. The rebels of Naga Hills, they formed their own parallel government that was titled as the federal government of Nagaland, irrespective of, or even though there was Assam Rifles and state armed forces, they were trying to contend the issue. So then the Armed Forces Special Powers Ordinance of 1958 was promulgated by then President Dr. Rajendra Prasad on 22nd May 1958. It was replaced by the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Earlier it was an ordinance, then it was replaced by an act in 1958 on 11th September 1958. So this is the pathway how this act came into existence. Now, what are the powers that is provided according to this act? The Armed Forces Special Powers Act 1958 empowered only the governors of the states and the administrators of the union territories. So it is the governors of the states and the administrators of the union territories. They are empowered to declare areas in the concerned state or the union territory as disturbed. So only two people have that authority. One is governor, other one is the administrators of the union territories. They have the power to declare any state or the union territory as disturbed. The reason for conferring such a power, as per objects and reasons appended to the bill, was that keeping in view the duty of the union under Article 355 of the Constitution, inter alia, among others, to protect every state against internal disturbance, it is considered desirable that the central government should also have power to declare areas as disturbed to enable its armed forces to exercise the special powers. Later, we are supposed to study various features of the act. Now let us understand what are the features that this act is going to provide. The articles in the Constitution of India empower state governments to declare a state of emergency due to one or more of the following reasons. Reason number one, failure of the administration and the local police to tackle local issues. Number two, return of security forces. So when the central security forces come back, it might lead to return of miscreants and erosion of the peace and dividend. Number three, the scale of unrest or instability in the state is too large for local forces to handle. In such cases, it is the prerogative of the state government to call for central help. AFSPA is confined to be enacted only when a state or part of it, so it might be to the complete state or to only part of the state, is declared a disturbed area, continued unrest, like in the cases of militancy and insurgency especially. So this is important when there are border issues, when the borders are threatened, or situations where AFSPA is resorted to. By Act 7 of 1972, the power to declare areas as being disturbed was extended to the central government as well. Now let us see what all the powers that is there in the AFSPA. According to the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, in an area that is proclaimed as disturbed, an officer of the armed forces has following powers. Number one, after giving such due warning, fire upon or use other kinds of force even if it is causing death against the person who is acting against law or order in the disturbed area for the maintenance of public order. So it doesn't matter, they can fire or they can use any other kind of force. It might even lead to the death of a person who is actually acting against the law or order in the disturbed area. Then destroy any arms dump, hideouts, prepared or fortified positions or shelters or training camps from which armed attacks are made by the armed volunteers or armed gangs or absconders wanted for any offense. To arrest without a warrant, they need not even serve the warrant. To arrest without a warrant anyone who has committed cognizable offenses or is reasonably suspected of having done so and may use force if needed for the arrest. So next is to enter and search any premise in order to make such arrests or to recover any person wrongfully restrained or any arms, ammunition or explosive substances and seize it, and stop and search any vehicle or vessel reasonably suspected to be carrying such persons or weapons. Any person arrested or taken into custody under this act shall be made present over to the officer in charge of the nearest police station with least possible delay. That means without taking too much of time, they should be presented to the nearest police station together with the report of the circumstances of occasioning the arrest. So they should also give the report why they have been arrested. And this is most controversial part, that is army officers have legal immunity for their actions. So whatever they do in the disturbed area to contain the people or the rebels, they have immunity for their actions against prosecution. There can be no prosecution, suit or any other legal proceedings against anyone acting under that law, nor is the government's judgment on why an area is found to be disturbed subject to judicial review. Point number 8, protection of person acting in good faith under this act from prosecution, suit or other legal proceedings except with the sanction of the central government in exercise of powers conferred by this act. So these are the powers that are given to the armed forces according to AFSPA. Now let us talk about the various commissions on AFSPA. First and foremost, it was Justice Jeevan Reddy Commission on AFSPA. The commission recommended to repeal actually the AFSPA as the act is a symbol of hate, oppression and instrument of high-handedness. It had submitted its report in 2005 But after 10 years, the government of India rejected the recommendations made by Justice Jeevan Reddy Commission to repeal the AFSPA. So the report given said to repeal AFSPA, but government after 10 years rejected the recommendations given by Justice Jeevan Reddy Commission. Next, second Administrative Reforms Commission on AFSPA. The second Administrative Reforms Commission, that is ARC, in its fifth report on public order recommended to repeal, same like before. So they also recommended to repeal of Armed Forces Special Powers Act 1958. So they also gave one more suggestion, that is, it commented that its scrapping would remove sentiments of discrimination and alienation among the people of northeastern India. The commission recommended to amend the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967 by inserting a new chapter to deploy the armed forces of Union in the northeastern states. So instead of AFSPA, they also suggested that under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967 to insert the new chapter to deploy armed forces of the Union in the northeastern states. It supported a new doctrine of policing, criminal justice inherent in an inclusive approach to the governance. Now let us see what Supreme Court said recently about AFSPA. So on July 2016, on 8th July 2016, in a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court of India ended the immunity of the armed forces from prosecution under AFSPA. So it was when we read the features of AFSPA, so there was immunity against armed forces for various acts under the law, but Supreme Court actually ended that immunity. So there was no scope for prosecution or suit earlier, but now Supreme Court ended that immunity of the armed forces from prosecution under AFSPA, saying it doesn't matter whether the victim was a common person or a militant or a terrorist, nor does it matter whether the aggressor was a common person or the state. The law is the same for both and is equally applicable to both. This is the requirement of a democracy and the requirement of preservation of the rule of law and preservation of individual liberties. So this is what is the statement said by the Supreme Court of India. So these are all the details with respect to AFSPA. If you have any questions, you can definitely put in comments box. We will try to answer to those questions. Thanks for watching. Namaste.